All right, thanks a lot. I don't think I haven't seen my charts so big. Um, so this is me, but sometimes I shave my head, so that's what I look like. And my wife was not very happy when I did that because I think I look like a prisoner. But I mean, it's fine. The baby grows back, so it's fine. So I'm Laurent. I'm from Switzerland. I actually we chat with Vladimir because my partner and CT of the company is Serbian. So we also have an office in Belgrade, but we have an office in Lausanne. The French-speaking part of Switzerland is where I'm from. And so I wanted to explain a bit like this trend of putting containers online. And I'm sure like I don't need to explain to anybody here what's the use of containers and what's the benefit of containers. But I wanted also to find a study that um, quantifies a bit the benefits of containers in productivity. How do you know? I mean, obviously, if you're a coder, if you're a developer, you know that it's efficient to use Docker on your laptop. You know, it's going to make your life easier because you can isolate dependencies of your code, and it's much easier to send some code to somebody else and say, like, can you try this? And you have all the dependencies and the things. So you have the whole like infrastructure as code that you can send with the code itself. So everybody's aware of that, but like there's actually not many studies that show what's going to be the business benefit of doing this. And I think if you're an organization, you might be willing to put some figures on that technology. So I found a study. Actually, it's publicly available. It's from Forrester Research. It's something that I think it was done into last year. I'll give you the details, and I think the real, I mean, thing I really wanted to mention here in this like that I think what is new about this respect to the study I will mention is that I felt like what happened if you put containers online, because the study actually refers to the use of container on your desk on your laptop. So this is something that is very common, but like now that everybody's putting containers online, and now if you're not familiar with this, don't worry. I'll explain what this is, and I give you examples of solutions. Then what is there an additional benefit? And we expect this an additional benefit, but I want to explain that thing. Just about myself, you can send me an invite on LinkedIn if you want. If you want to contact me about this talk. My background is in cybersecurity. Um, and I actually that's why I build tools that really somehow relate to cybersecurity. I'm interested in protecting data, especially in the case of a code development process. You see, it's something that I was just in a presentation before in security, the shift left, and I think yeah, people talk about securing all the tools I use for back office and also management of all the customer data and all this type of things. But also there's an interest of protecting the development workforce because it's actually the largest attack surface that you have in organizations. Developers' laptop actually a large attack surface, and they're very sensitive to phishing attacks and to malware. So I mentioned a few very recent interesting event that occurred like earlier this year, and this is what interests me. And also in this talk, I will introduce that inline containers also can provide additional security to protect against that. So my background in cybersecurity, before we started Stone Network about 2 years and a half ago. We have a platform that I'll explain how it compares to other products that exist. But like we're selling worldwide right now. And before that, I was working for Snapchat. So you might know if you have kids. I have two, but they were on TikTok right now for some reason. But I'm always surprised when they still use Snapchat. They still have friends on Snapchat. So yeah, it's not dead, right? I was actually the director of cybersecurity for Snapchat. And the reason why I was there, you can see this on my LinkedIn, is that they actually bought my previous startup. So I have a previous startup cybersecurity called Strong Codes. There's no relationship with the when we do Strong Network, but this one was bought by Snapchat. And this is how I came to create StrongCore. And actually, my partner, co-founder and CTO, Ozrenko, I mentioned before from Serbia, he was actually working with me at Snap. So So what I just want to give like a bit of context because like this, I think it will be easier to understand. Uh, let's say you want to move to a DevOps process from like an organization that might have a few years of development under its belt, and and if you started doing development like without really having too much of a DevOps culture, then you might have to to deal with some legacy tools, some application that might not be done in a way that it's efficiently deployed today. Application that doesn't use microservices and type of things. So I think it's something that you have to deal with. So typically, companies that want to migrate to DevOps, they won't have to deal with legacy tools and processes. Monolithic applications. It's obviously expensive to manage. Is something that will take time to maintain. And I mentioned the lack of DevOps culture, and it's something. I mean, I'm sure most of you perhaps read the DevOps handbook. So there's, I think, the three principle of feedback. I mean, principle. I mean, there's things basically. If you can put a DevOps culture in a company, that definitely will align with typically the benefits that is provided by the modern way to develop applications. And what is expected when moving to an agile methodology, agile basically is like the precept of DevOps. I'm not going to go through the history, but he went through some step before we called this DevOps. But I think it started with the Agile Manifesto, and the benefit is to bring more team velocity, reduce development costs, accelerate releases, and so on. Typically, when I was working for Snap, the interval between two release about 2 weeks. We're releasing a new application every 2 weeks, so it's very intense. Sometimes we were failing to release the application because the build was broken. But I mean, I think there were about like 2,000 developers working on the app. Uh, might be surprised the first time you hear that because such an app, but like, it's so complex that we need that amount of developers working on it. So many things can break. Team velocity. I also mentioned like there's also a lot of talk about like how to measure team velocity, and this is something very, very interesting. Infrastructure efficiency. You want to improve asset utilization because obviously when you deploy your application, you have to do this as efficient as possible because obviously when it's an operation, it costs you, right? Especially if it's not self-hosted, you have to host yourself the application to a cloud. Then that will be really a thing that will impact your bottom line. So you need to make sure that you release application in a most efficient way. So asset utilization is a very important concept. Even if your customers, right, you want to make sure that your customer have as an ROI as high as possible, so you make sure that things are well efficiently deployed. And operational risk reduction. This is something you can talk just about this for hours, but you want to obviously improve developer experience, but give collaboration between dev and ops team. Risk reduction is in many areas, and I'll touch some of them. But you want to make sure also that your process is secure and for instance, your source code is not stolen, and that happens quite often recently. So, what is the return investment that I want to explore today? I have 4 areas, and I report 4 main results. This is the study I mentioned. The first study, the total economic impact of Red Hat services and support for OpenShift. So this is really something that talks about like use of containers for development and how you can deploy it on Red Hat. It's really interesting because it gives you an end-to-end, like from development to production operations. So it's really give you like very important information. You can see what are the expected benefits you can get for your process, and then there's 4 areas that there's. I think there's a bit more results in the study, but I wanted to report over these 4 areas because I think they're quite general and they give you also a glimpse of several stages across the life cycle of an application. First of all, the time required to develop, document, and design an application. Can this be accelerated using containers and a good methodology? The second one is application development testing and deployment cycles. I mean, this is something we're quite used to. I think the first one is interesting because we don't usually think like the design time of the application, although it's definitely something that I can especially foster innovation, right? If you have to come up with new product, you have to spend some time on that phase before going to the area number 2. The number 3 is release cycles. When the application is in production, we need to update the application, we need to maintain the application. That's at a cost. So can we do this as efficiently as possible? And the last one is really on production. This is the bottom line impact that I was mentioning before. Is that what is the infrastructure utilization? What is the virtual machine footprint of the application, and so on. So the study is quite interesting because it's done on companies about 2,000 employees, 100 developers. So this is not that much, right? Because it's not an SME, but it's not a large company. The company we work with, for instance, like their banks. To give you an idea, right? Because the first time I heard that, my jaw dropped. Like Bank of America, 60,000 developers. I don't know how they use them, but this is really what they have. So, and this is not uncommon. Actually, Morgan Stanley companies, they have tens of thousands of developers. So it's really amazing thing. So these are quite small companies do that, but it's not that small. It's not a startup company, right? So I think it's a good way also to assess, because I think you can. It's actually a good metric to create a study, because you can kind of interpolate between and before. If like the study was only made like for 500 or of 2,000 developers, people might take it with a grain of salt and say, that doesn't apply to us, right? Because we're too small, right? So I think it's a good thing. So I encourage you to read that study and to see if you can learn something. And also there was 150 apps, 50 new apps a year. So it's interesting. 3-year study period, so it's quite significant. And the companies that were interviewed, they have limited develop skills. So also there's kind of a change of culture inside the company. So I think it's a good information, because you might not pretend that your company has all the skills for DevOps, right? You might have a few people that might be very good at this, aware of how really to deploy efficiently a process, especially on how you do this on the major clouds in terms of technology and all those things. But it's not something we should take for granted. So let's go. First of all, so local against online. So the study here, and this is when I read that study, I was like, it was interesting, because this is really applying to the use of local containers. And so just for show of hands, like everybody who's not using Docker, who's using Docker? Listen, who's using Docker for containers? Yeah. And who's using online containers for development? Okay, that's what I thought. So it's very common basically to use Docker on your laptop, but it is a trend. So there's a few products that came out recently that allow you to basically use containers online. There's one called GitHub Codespaces. Who has used GitHub Codespaces before? Okay, so you use online containers, but is that to try, right? Perhaps. Yeah, okay, play around. Yeah, that's great. This is what people do. There's also something called Google Workstation. Does that ring a bell? It's very recent, right? I think it came out last year, and the Googles, they're not actually fantastic for marketing sometimes, because they assume that everybody knows everything about them. So when they come up with a product, they don't even tell you, oh, there's a new stuff coming up, right? So I think they don't spend a lot of money in marketing, because they have monopoly in many things. So Google Workstation is something that is quite similar to Codespaces with some different paradigm. I mentioned, well, just very quickly, like typically a Codespace from Google is linked to the branch of your development, although a Google Workstation is, like as the name indicates, a workstation. They give you like, oh, I have this Linux machine that is online. So it's like an EC2 instance on AWS, but with different things, and basically access to an IDE. You have direct access to an IDE, and I'll show you some things. But I'm glad that people here in the audience are not very used to online containers. I can show you a demo. And there's also like some startup that created like this, came up with this a few years ago. There's one called Gitpod. Who knows Gitpod? Only a few people. I thought more people we know Gitpod. There's another startup in the US called Coder. Have you heard about Coder? Okay, a bit fewer people. Okay, so there's a few startups, and I think there's going to be more and more. There's also Red Hat has a service called, I hate the names, like DevEnv. It's really, I think it's really bad for marketing. Did anybody have used DevEnv on Red Hat? now, right? I'm not surprised about that. So what happened is that it's a trend really that came about like 3 years ago. It started 2, 3 years ago. The startups they were like created at that time. Sorry, about 5 years ago. But I think it was mostly unnoticed because there's not be a major adoption. And I'll tell you about like what happened with our company. This is the logo for Strong Network. So personally, when I was so I had a 3 year earnout period with Snap, right? So actually after 3 year, 1 year, 1 day, I'd say goodbye, and I wanted to create a new product. So I started looking around what was in, and this is actually when I looked at the solution like Gitpod and some other things, and I saw GitHub Codespaces was still a beta at this time. They came out like GA last year, I think end of last year, I think Q3 or Q4 last year. And I look at this and say, this is interesting stuff, right? But like, since I'm a security guy, I was thinking, hey, can we actually add some kind of security to that? So this is where actually we play a role. But let's go first into bringing container online. So what's the advantage of having online containers first? So if since many of you today use Docker on your laptop, you know what to do, right? You create some code, you do Docker build, Docker run, and so on, right? So it's you have kind of to do all the manipulations yourself. But what you can do if you have online containers, then it's going to be much simpler because basically you can access your containers like they was like a remote machine, right? So I don't know if you've lived this time, but like some time ago, I know Vladimir actually mentioned this yesterday. We're using SSH or even Telnet. Who remembers Telnet? Oh my, yeah, right. So we might be the same age. So yeah, so we were actually accessing remotely machines and working on it, right? This is and you can do this today. You can spawn an EC2 instance and then you can access with SSH and so on. So it's a bit like the same principle, but you're gonna have like better way than just a text terminal to access the machine. But that's the thing. So when you access the machine, actually what you're accessing is a container. It's a container that basically you can take as is and then bring to production. So you kind of freeze you to do all this Docker build, Docker run, and all things. So that's what the advantage is. But then you need to have a good way to manage this. So let me show you how it looks like. And I wanted to do a live demo, but you know how it goes. Every time you do a live demo, something fails. So I'm going to try to do. So this is like a running container. I can see this is our platform. I'm not going to go through it. This is a bunch of running. This is actually all my team working on it. So we have this is the Strong Network project. So we obviously develop Strong Network with Strong Network, and but you can have many projects. And so all these containers here, running containers, are actually a machine that people are working. So this is people in my team working partly in Switzerland, partly in Belgrade here. And I have my container here, my workspace, and then what I can do, I can open it, and this is Visual Studio Code running. This is actually, look at this. This is running on my laptop, so it's actually running on my browser as like a web application. But here I'm connected to a container. So here, if basically I create a file here, this file was created remotely on a running container on Kubernetes in AWS, right? So it's actually not living. This is a Chromebook, so it's not really living on my so if you remember the SSH stuff, this is a principle. You create something remote, they don't exist on your machine, right? So but here you're really living into a Linux container, and this is something that you can bring straight into production here. So this is it, and let me just So this is your stuff, and basically, if I can also open that thing here as a terminal, because if I like VI terminals, it's a file I was doing before, and I can use Vim and so on. And this is so I can actually access my container, in different ways. But this is everything happens here in the browser. And what's the advantage of doing this is like things a bit like Google Doc, right? You can open your complete environment for development anywhere on any machine, right? You don't have to reinstall things. So basically, it's become like the hardware and stuff. It becomes like not your main concern when you're working, because basically here everything that happens, even the compilation of the code, will happen on the cloud. So using basically a machine that is running in the cloud, and you compile everything, and what you have on your machine here is thing. And if you're being torture by using a remote desktop for development or Citrix VDI, which I obviously don't think. This is not the same because this is not the streaming desktop, right? This is something that is completely executing. So it's the same, and it's 100% the same code of VS Code that is running, that is actually can be installed locally, because I think the version of the VS Code is actually running in a mini browser. The one you install locally is running in a mini browser. It actually was written in TypeScript, and it can be run efficiently like that. So that's the thing. And you can see you have many workspaces and so on. If I want to create a new workspace as a developer, or if I want, basically I mentioned is to onboard somebody, I can actually create this thing. I'm just going to create one more here for the demo. This one I'm going to create a one for data science. Here I can take an image. So basically here my resources, this is where I select my container. I select the container here. I think, yeah, it's big enough. Yeah, it's big enough, obviously. Select my container here. I can actually share this with somebody else. I'll show you the sharing effect. I can select the ID. I have VS Code. I have some PyCharm, like IntelliJ from JetBrains and so on. I can select the number of CPUs and so on. I'm going to select the resource I want to access here. I can access an entire application, but what I'm going to do here, I'm going to access like a special project that give me some Jupyter notebook. So you can do coding or data science really doesn't make any difference today, is the thing. I'm not going to go into the security thing, but I'm going to put a bit of monitoring of what's happening on my workspace, because I'm going to share some, like diabetes information. So I don't want this to be pilfered. So basically, I want to protect this against exfiltration. And here, I will deploy my workspace and so on, and I can actually, I will have this ready in a few seconds. Let me go back to things. So this is how it looks like. So once you can actually manage containers online, well, everybody's going to access this UI, and people that have ownership of workspaces, they will see workspaces coming up here. Since I'm a project owner, I will see all the workspaces in my team here. Here, for instance, you can see this one is shared with me. So I would just want to show you what happens. It's say this my one is running now. I'll go back to it. But like, for instance, Bjorn here, who's one of my employees, he has shared his workspace with me, so I can open his workspace here. And this, like, again, like we would share a Google Doc, I can go and I can say, hey, let me help you with this. And he can see I'm connected because you want to maintain privacy. You can see I'm connected to his workspace here. So you see, and we can have any number of people, right? And you can say, like, cool. It's called peer editing. Or peer coding. Have you heard about peer coding before? So this is something that is fully supported here, and you can do this any number of people. I would not advise to do this with a lot of people because it might be a bit messy, but this is something that we can do. There you go. So let me just go back and go on the results here of the study. So now that we know what's things, just one thing. So I mentioned there's many solutions for online containers. I mentioned GitHub Codespaces, Google Workstation, Gitbot Coders, Stack Blitz. Sorry, there's a typo here, CodeSphere. But I mean, that's the thing. But they all do these type of things. And here, this is our platform. The difference with our platform and other things that I'm not here basically to talk about our platform in particular is that we actually added all enterprise data protection. So here what we do, basically what you would do by deploying a Citrix VDI, VMware Horizon, AWS Workspace, or DevBox in terms of data loss prevention, we'll do it, but with containers. So that's how we position ourselves. That's why actually we actually work with the banks, the insurances, and company that need this kind of protection. So the first result that I want to talk about, so using container locally, reduce the time of required to plan, document, and design this application by over 80%. So that's the first result. And I think it's interesting to see because over 8% might sound really interesting. But if you look at the result, if you look at the number of applications that can be built annually, this is where you get this type of metrics, right? Because how they did to get that type of information is like, see how many applications can we build per year. And again, I don't know about your organization, but an organization they have 50 new applications per year seems a lot. But I guarantee you, when you work with banks, it's normal. So that's one of the interesting things here. Is that it's actually not crazy numbers, but this is things. So basically here you can see that one way basically to release more applications is basically when things are containerized, then it's much easier because I think you would deal less with issues according to planning, documentation, and dependencies. So one of the advantages is that what I was mentioning is that if you want to be efficient here, you have to have a way to manage your container efficiently. And this is where basically why you would have in a platform, you need to look for an efficient way to manage containers. So I'll show you this here that it's very easy to go and access your containers. You can see all your workspaces. You can, so if you have a way for your employees and to look at quickly access container, create a new container. I did that just before I created the one for data science here that I did here. And you can see here in a few seconds, actually, I created a new container. And look at this. This is an interesting thing. Is now the project that I connected here is an authenticated project. It's not a public repo. It's actually a private repo, but it's already completely cloned and all the keys, everything was done for you. So this is one of the big advantages. When you have online containers, there are many operations that the developers would have to do. Then they don't need to do anymore because you can manage all the security for them. So the big advantage is that, well, first of all, none of the keys here would live really on the workspace. They will live somewhere in the proxy. This is the differentiator that we have with other online containers, right? All the keys will be, so we basically free developers to manage any of these credentials and so on. So which, if I want to start working, then if you're a coder like me, SSH key gen, you have to get your private key, put your public key into the repo, and then clone. It's going to take you half an hour, and it's annoying. So here, everything is already done. And look at this; it's fully configured because the container that I used here for my workspace is completely configured. It's completely configured for usage of data science in this case. So all the libraries that you will have to install here. And if I try here to run an application, because that's also a common question that people have. Since I'm already online, how can I run an application on localhost? How can I run an application that, because it's already online? It's kind of an inception type of recursion, right? But you can do that here because we actually support that stuff. So I'm going to run an application. There's a little application called Voila that runs an application here. So with support here, we can create an app here automatically. This is an extension that we built for VS Code. I'm going to create an app here. I'm going to make it public. I'll explain that to UI. And here I have an app running on data science. And what's going to happen here is that here I go back to my to my UI here, and the app I'm running here appear here automatically. Okay, and I can open it, and voila. And this is my app running. So this is running on my workspace and so on. And something that I wanted to show you that's pretty cool for collaboration is that let's say now I take this URL and I put it in there. Let me just put it here. There you go. And if you scan this, you can open this application on your phone. It's running on my workspace. You can scan this and you'll be able to open this application right in your browser. So to collaborate, you can actually, because I made the link public, I can send this application to anybody in the world. So I want somebody to check my code, to check my UI and so on, you can actually open it. So if it doesn't work, let me know. But normally it should be working. So we good? Okay, it's working. Okay, thank you. So I can actually send you that application. You see, in terms of collaboration, it's really cool, right? Because you can do really amazing things with that. So, I mean, in terms of access, this is really resource creation and management. This is really where something that can help you. And that brings us to a second result here. It let you accelerate application development and testing, right? And in this case, it showed that you can slash cost by more than 60%. And I'm not going to go here into all the details. I'm going to go what's happening when you do this online. Then here, this is what I was explaining before, is that once you have an online container, so here what I did before, when I opened this with VS Code here, I'll actually here have what is called a Cloud IDE, right? This is the way to run VS Code on the browser, but you don't have to do this necessarily. You can also open here, at least on our platform, you can open this, you can access this container with SSH. So there's an extension of VS Code that is called VS Code Remote Dev, or something called like JetBrains Gateway, and you can actually connect to your container using the local IDE. So you're not forced to use the Cloud IDE. If you don't want to, you can also connect with a local IDE. So in terms of connection, is really good. But like what we can do more than that, basically, you can actually manage all the credential, all authentication to this. So basically, your developer doesn't need to deal with credentials anymore. And we're not only talking about credential for Git, but I mean also credential for any type of resources like HTTP, SSH, and stuff. And what we do here also is on the platform, we actually give access directly to GitHub through the platform here, and you can basically access your GitHub directly from here. So, and this is going to be through a secure browser here. Yeah, I'm just gonna go for the interest of time. There you go. All right. Okay, the third result here is that developer accelerated release cycle and so on, application update and maintenance cost by 50% average. There's something here that is very important, because what happens in many companies is that maintenance and upgrade of application is sometimes not done by the original developer team. It's actually a lot of time maintenance application is outsourced. It could be like, in countries basically it's more like efficient, use of your budget for labor cost and so on. But we're not going into detail for that. But basically what happened is that a lot of times, so what happened is here is that I think this is where security becoming very interesting, because a lot of companies, when they outsource the maintenance of the application to like a remote development team, there could be some issues with data, source code, and so on, and something that, so this is where basically also where with strong network played a role in basically securing this type of relationship, because usually this was done with VDIs from Citrix or remote desktops, and for some startups that we've seen also TeamViewer. So I don't know if you try to code through TeamViewer, it's a nightmare, right? But it's like a poor, and that's why it doesn't even protect you, because like the clipboards can still like be copied and everything. So what we do here is that I think here DLP really creates like a lot of value for that. And what I want to show you here is that even large companies, they actually get hacked, and they have no protection this if there's not something that is put in place. So if you're interested in security, I wrote that article a few months ago here that explains basically how that was, I think, January or February. Slack, Okta, and Circle CI got all hacked from their source code. Why? Because they are credentialed all over the developer's laptop, right? And if there's nothing done for that, then basically simple phishing attacks, which is exactly what happened to them here. Phishing attack basically will make your source code like open source for everybody, right? Which if when you Okta, it's an issue, right? And or Slack or like it's also 1Password. I think they have the main issue. So when password managers source code is becoming open source, is an issue, right? So here. And the last one here I wanted to mention here before I was hoping to leave a bit of time for question, and I can show you more thing about the demo, is the efficiency of infrastructure utilization, right? I think this is something that's very important, because I mentioned that at the beginning, this is really your bottom line cost. This is how much it's going to cost you to run application here. So basically, obviously, using containers, you don't necessarily deploy directly containers. You can do efficient twist like a Lambda function, or you can run serverless and this type of things. But it's basically a far cry compared to what you would do if you deploy directly VMs and so on. So, but especially when you have also microservices, you can improve the asset utilization. And this is something that we reduce your cost or your cost of your customers in case you're selling self-hosted applications. One thing also I wanted to mention here, this is an article that I wrote about the whole concept that the developer laptop is getting virtualized. So this is in effect what's happening with online containers, right? Because when you have online containers, is that I mentioned that before, is that your laptop is interchangeable from a hardware perspective, right? I can use this laptop to code, but if I go home and I open up and I can open my environment and I have the same thing, I don't have to reinstall anything. This is one of the the huge benefits of having a thing that runs basically online, is that I can open like any number of different projects, and things will be running from this Chromebook or my Windows machine or my Mac at home and so on. So I don't have any issue with this. So this is one of the advantages, and this is why, and the advantage of having also online containers, it is basically the orientation that we took as a company, as Strong Network, is that not only you make your development portable, you make security portable. We want the security to follow the developer, right? So basically, we don't want to have any information that could be used to hack the company on the laptop. So even if you use a laptop, it doesn't matter. It's not basically an issue for the company. And if you look at this article, if you read what I did in this article to explain a bit of the history of that, because if you look at what happened like in the last 10 years, the first data that went from the developers lab to the cloud was customer data, CRM data. Before Salesforce, many salespeople were traveling with the entire customer data on the laptop. So it was a catastrophe basically when they lose a laptop or something like that, because it exposes like the company to litigation, like regulations and all those things, right? So I think this is one of the main issues. So and in this article explained the different step of evolution, and now we're getting to the last type of data that is really living on some of actually perhaps most of the developers' laptop is the source code and data and credentials that access your online application, right? And this is really what is moving now to the cloud. This is exactly the reason for all this new Google Workstation, GitHub Codespaces, application like ours, and some other stuff. This is really why this is happening. So this is kind of the last step in evolution of the thing. Yeah. Oh yeah. And this is I want to show you one of the really cool stuff that happens with putting container online is visibility. So there was a really interesting talk yesterday about observability and how you can bring information back to your development. So here we have what we call insights. So what we call insights, basically we have a CLI, and we can actually make any type of measurement we want on the entire workforce on their workspaces. So here, for instance, I can measure, this is real-time data. This is basically the average build time of my developers. So whenever they build, automatically I take the result and I put it in the backend. I do statistics and I report it here. So in real time, the project manager can look at what's the average build time. And you can see, it's getting up, it's getting down. So this is something that is really valuable information, which is actually impossible to read if you don't have online containers, right? So once you have online containers, you have a huge benefit in observability and so on. So you can measure pretty much everything you want. And so we do this for processes, resource allocation. Also, we know basically how much Kubernetes cluster is going up and down in terms of process allocation and so on. So you can still control your cost and all those things, right? And interesting, we did a lot of TCOs, total cost of ownership study. Actually, it's much cheaper than laptops. So it's actually half of the cost. If you manage your entire team with online containers and $1,000 Chromebook, which is quite cool Chromebook, then it's actually half the price you will use for your laptop. For your normal developed laptops, we're talking about like Macs and type of things. And for the same basically power, because they have access to the cloud, and if they want a 128 CPU machine, they can have it for a few hours. For you, it will be like an incremental expense. So there's also a user benefit, also sustainability, right? Because we don't need to consume that much like expensive hardware, and it's something that is also, this is actually one of the aspects also is very interesting to explore. And I'm also getting to the end of this talk because I have a whole series of webinars that I'm giving on these things, like for instance, replacing the use of secure laptop for developers, regulatory and security compliance, and so on here. So if you want to, I actually have one on June 1st. On June 1st, I'm going to talk about DevSecOps automation and governance. So you'll see, because there's a lot of things you can do on DevSecOps with online containers that could be fully automated. So it's actually really an efficient thing. So if you want to attend one of these webinars, please feel free to scan this code. And then, and again, please contact me if you have any question. That's it.